All right, switching gears. I have four changes related to AutoVis. This is the stuff that Ariel alluded to earlier. I'm going to demo two of them and I'll describe the other two. So the first one is sort of what we suspect is what most users or what users want the most. And basically, what it is now on a tab, if you make changes to a chart, and then you switch over to a different view or a different type of chart. You make changes here and then switch back. We persist those changes across viz changes so you can quickly preview what your data is going to look like in different shapes. We can retain like different color settings. Um, we even currently persist this on this branch across page refreshes for now. Once you leave the workbook, these are not persisted, so it's just meant to be a sort of improvement to the editing and exploration experience. It's not meant to be like a long-lived thing, but it's definitely a step towards the direction of potentially retaining these settings longer. Any questions about this one before I move on? Oh, it also
When
works
is it?
across tabs.
When are you thinking about landing this, or is this landed, or when will folks see it?
I mean, PR's up. It could land today. I'm
Okay.
highly confident in the implementation. Um, Yeah, the one last thing I wanted to demo here is it works across tabs. So in this case, I duplicated a tab that didn't duplicate the other state of the charts I had set. So like, for example, when I click here, this has gone back to blue, but really this is just the default behavior. It's because on this tab, I haven't made any changes. So here, if I pick a completely different color, yellow, and then I switch back here, now on this tab, my state should be persisted, so this should be sort of purplish. Um, so just validating that there's no cross-tab bleed over of settings or conflicts. Cool. So that's the one big change. Second one is I intentionally did not demo advanced or markdown, and it's because those two are special cases. Advanced today, basically when you create a Cartesian chart, you click advanced, it's going to show you the code for the Cartesian chart. And likewise, if you're in KPI and you switch to markdown, it shows you your markdown code generated by the KPI viz. And so here, if I come in and I make an edit and I switch out, we're actually not going to retain the edit, and that's obviously not desirable. So the next change I'm going to demo attempts to address this. Okay, so on this tab, um, basically we're experimenting, Sarah and I are experimenting with changing some of the behavior of advanced and markdown. In advanced, when I switch to advanced now, by default, it doesn't pull up anything. We might want to tweak this because it's a little bit of an abrupt change. But the idea here is we make advanced mode both in Markdown and in the Vega editor a little bit more explicit. We require you to edit your code, and we don't sort of magically swap it out. This is a common complaint, especially when folks are trying to build out like Vega-based maps and then accidentally or maybe intentionally changing chart types to see what their data looks like and then switching back and losing their data. So now to alleviate that sort of like gap that we've created by not automatically pulling in the Vega code, we have this new menu here, this new option. Today it just has one option. In the future, we're going to have a second that just lets you view source kind of in a modal. Should be kind of cool. So you can pull it up and go to the online Vega editor if you want to mess around with it. But if you want to edit it in our app and have the sort of prior experience, just click this, switches you over. Now you're in advanced with all of the data from your chart. And now, because, we're being explicit, oops, I guess that part of the demo doesn't work yet. But in the future, when you change chart types, this will be, oh, actually, how silly of me. I know exactly why it doesn't work. It doesn't work because I built this branch in isolation from this other change. And when the two are merged together, they're going to basically stack. And so when you switch types, the advanced code will be retained, just like how over here, when you make edits, your chart configs are retained. So once the two merge together, you'll be able to change chart types. You won't lose your data in here. You won't lose your settings. You won't lose your maps, whatever you're working on. And you can always decide to overwrite by, building a new chart type and then saying like, use source in advance. So those are the two. And then the other two
Really,
that
really
I'm not
nice.
going to, cool. Glad to hear it. We wanted to get your take on this, Colin. So
Really
glad to
nice. I
hear
mean, it's
that.
gonna like every change, it's going to be confusing for the people that are just used to clicking into advanced, but completely reasonable flow here. Like it's it is weird to not be able to go back and forth between advanced and the viz. Um, like a routine example is trying to just see what the viz would look like in a standard state, and you can't toggle back and forth at all.
Yeah, and the hope
Yeah.
is like we'll add that, like you said, the popover. So if you need to just like to view the source of like a standard one to like steal something or just see what how it's done, you should be able to see it without needing to go view it in the thing that's editing the actual advanced
Yeah,
viz.
that would be. I mean, the standard now is I just make a copy, but as you build up tabs, that gets kind of annoying, and it's really common that you're like, "What is the field reference on this thing? I need to see the code to go grab it." And so, like a little bit more elegance here is actually very meaningful.
So the last two changes are a little subtle. I'll just try to explain them quickly in words, but basically, the biggest one is today when you have a maybe perhaps an atypical um, chart configuration where you've stacked a bunch of things on the x-axis. Um, when you the way our code works today, when you like add certain fields, see if this does it. Yeah, so you may have noticed like the fields over here just reset, and so the next change will actually preserve all those field settings. So basically, it acknowledges when a user has explicitly mapped fields to certain aesthetics on the chart. We'll just preserve those, especially when you're adding and removing fields. Um, and the last change is a very subtle one, but um, the way our sort of auto chart heuristics work today is if I go create a new chart and let's do something like this. And I come in here and I like change a color. Under the hood, we don't acknowledge the fact that the user has started to interact with the config editor. We only acknowledge when they explicitly change the chart type. And so if I now add like a date dimension, the chart dramatically switches to a line chart. And in some cases, that's probably the right call, or that's probably eventually where the user wants to go. But we've gotten a lot of feedback that can be confusing, especially if you've done a bunch of work to narrowly configure a chart. You've mapped a bunch of colors. You've made some like label changes, etc., and then you just add a new field, and all of a sudden your chart type switches. So this last change basically observes all of the changes that could happen within the chart editor, and as soon as a manual change happens, we explicitly map whatever kind of chart the auto-vis has created for the user to like an explicit setting. So we basically say, okay, drop out of auto mode. You're working on a column chart. We're going to stay in column chart mode. And obviously the user can click line chart or column chart or whatever they want to switch chart types at that point. But it should prevent that sudden flip that people find confusing. So those four changes are all should be coming out in the next week or two.
Sick.